This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard, hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for us on your podcast provider. It used to be hard enough to get your kids ready for school. At any age, there's the 5 more minutes plea, the breakfast, the toothbrushing, the getting clothes on, early morning sibling rivalry jibes, and then either shooting them out the door as the clock ticks onwards, or grabbing them by the hand and racing to the gates before you have to do the walk of shame through the office because you're late, and invariably you've forgotten something on the way. This September, though, brings new difficulties. Many children haven't been to school since lockdown was imposed on March 23rd. Lives have changed. Routines, if there were any, are different. The first day back at class will be a shock to the system that none of us have ever encountered. It is going to be hard, but our editorial column says it'll be worth it.
The government's campaign to ensure that schools reopen next month has been stepped up with a declaration in this newspaper by Education Secretary Gavin Williamson that there is a moral imperative on all those involved to deliver this. As the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, has made clear, there's an incredibly small risk of children suffering lasting harm from COVID-19, whereas they can sustain significant damage from being absent from class. Schools must reopen, and parents must do their bit by sending their children when they do.
So what do we need to do to support our children when they go back to school? Well, I'm joined now by the child psychologist Emma Kenny. Emma, how difficult is this going to be for some kids?
I think that kids going back to school on one level is brilliant because children need to be around children, teens need to be around teens, they need to be with their mates, socialising and having those conversations that they can't have with the parents. That is key to development. However, going back to a inverted commas, the word that everyone's saying, the new normal, is going to be affronting because it looks different, it feels different, the rules are different, it smells different. Breaks won't be available at certain schools, only dinner hours. So whilst you might have a reduced day, it might seem incredibly long. And on top of that, you might not be taught in the way that you've been taught prior. So you have to come to terms with this whole new situation, which for most people, changing one habit is quite a challenge. But when you've got to change many habits all in one go and also recognise why those habits have been changed, which has come from quite a scary position, understandably stress, anxiety, and also on a longer term level, I think particularly for the teens, they're not stupid. They know they've missed 6 months of their education and they have fears about what that means and how they compare on their education level in their school to other schools who may have done things differently.
So what does a parent do to reassure someone who's maybe a 14 or a 15-year-old, an older child, that it's going to be okay?
Essentially, as a parent, your job is to be the biggest cheerleader your child has, to remind them that even on an attainment level, if they drop a grade, it's not the end of the world. There are still opportunities. There are lots of possibilities from apprenticeships to going into the workforce. And actually, one of the things that we often say is, bizarrely, chaos tends to create the most growth in people. So even the negative stuff can usually in the long term be really positive. One of the things that I would say to parents, and it's something I've really had to think about and gestate on myself, both as a professional and as a parent, is usually I would be saying to my child, this is temporary. This is a measure that's just going to be for a short amount of time. But that's what I said at the beginning of lockdown when I was told it would be. And now we're 6 months down the line. So I think instead of trying to do that knee-jerk, this is all going to be fine, everything's going to get back to normal, it's more, okay, this is normal now. How do we adapt to it? How do we manage your stress and anxiety? And together, how do we make maybe not the most perfect situation feel at least better than it would be if you were sat at home without any of your mates?
Emma, is it true that children adapt and they can work with different environments quite quickly?
One of the things that I've always found a bit of a myth with the whole idea about kids' resilience is I think that's the way that us adults like to just imagine that we don't have to think about our kids' feelings, that somehow when something terrible and tragic or difficult and challenging occurs, kids just get on with it. And that actually plays them a real disservice because for a lot of kids, this is going to be really challenging. It's going to provoke anxiety. They might not talk to you about that, but it's there. They might feel quite scared about the change challenges. Also, they might feel very isolated when they return because they might not even be with their friends, so to speak. So I think that for parents, it's best to see that most children learn coping strategies like we all do. Some won't do as well as the others, and then we have to really step in and figure out how we're going to bring them to a position of peace within that experience. But I don't think we should do that whole, they'll be fine. I think that's the way that often we miss the real problems that children are developing. And certainly what I'm seeing online in forums that kids are talking about things, when it comes on social networks, they are struggling. They really are. And we must hear that.
I know that when my kid's going to get back from school and I ask him how it went, he's going to go, yeah, it's fine. And that's going to be the extent of the conversation. How do I and other parents bring this subject up? Or should we just let them take the lead?
I genuinely think that, like most particular teenagers, those one statements that they make of fine, it was okay, and so on and so forth, if we accept that, then they're never going to elaborate because it's just the way that they've learned to communicate, not having to share any deeper their feelings. So I would have this particularly with my younger boy. So what I do is every single day we go in our garage, basically, which we've made into a gym, and we work out together. And when we work out, I deflect his thoughts from many things and concentrate on a communication style between us, which is about, okay, tell me about what's going on, how are you feeling, what's frustrating you. And the other thing that I do, and I think it's really helpful, and we do it in conflict work actually, is we do side-by-side communication. So in the car or when you're walking, it means that you've not got those kind of really present body cues where you're looking at each other in their eyes and it feels quite really personal. Instead, if you can kind of just do this side by side and just use open questions, tell me what happened at school today, tell me what you struggled with, tell me what you enjoyed.
And just finally, Emma, I know there's going to be lots of parents who are unsure about this. There is trepidation about sending the children back to school while we're still in a pandemic. Yeah. For them, is it worth it? What are the benefits, or what could be the dangers of not sending their child back?
What you have to be as a parent really is the most rational sounding board for your child. We know statistically your child is more likely to get struck by lightning than die of this. That's a pretty healthy statistic. Secondly, we also know that whilst cases of the virus have gone up, actually incidences of death have gone down. That's again a really reassuring fact. And one of the most important things, and it's certainly the way I've raised my boys, is you live with risk every single second of the day. What are you going to be teaching your child if you suggest that there is a way of living without risk versus a way of living with risk? There is always risk. But for kids, school absolutely is vital for them to feel connected, have belongingness, learn, and most importantly, recognize that there will always be risks. So undertake to do that life joyfully in spite of that.